Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Switty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we're excited to spotlight a student organization here at the Darden School of Business, the Parents of Darden. This episode features two leaders of the organization, Lisandro Sagastume, a second-year student in the full-time MBA class of 2024, and Hailey Webster, a first-year student in the full-time MBA class of 2025. We talk with Lisandro and Hailey about their decision to pursue an MBA, what it's like navigating an MBA program as a parent, the support offered by the Parents of Darden student organization, and more. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to Experience Darden so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. Now, without further ado, here's my interview with Lisandro Sagastume and Hailey Webster. Lisandro, Hailey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Well, it's great having you here. Lisandro, how's everything? How are you doing?
Doing well, enjoying today. Gonna go home, watch a little bit of the Masters. Pretty good afternoon.
Yeah, in my mind, this is always the official start of spring. When the Masters is on television, sure, there may have already been the vernal equinox or whatever. Okay, but the spring really starts with the Masters on television and that beautiful Masters theme music, and you can watch, 9-10 hours of golf for a couple days. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Hailey, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm surviving first year. So I would say that's doing well.
Yeah, you're in quarter four now. Got to pick a few classes in addition to a couple of core classes that you're taking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so we're finishing up our core, which is really nice that we still have that community to meet with weekly. However, being able to take our own classes now and kind of branch out into what we specifically want to study is really nice.
And Lisandro, you're at a different point in your MBA journey. You're at the very end. I will say, interesting note for our listeners, when we were talking before the podcast, Lisandro had shared that he was at a practice round for the Masters earlier this week. So a slightly different schedule for second years and first year students at Darden. So, well, Lisandro, let's talk a little bit more about you and your background. So tell us who you are.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from Honduras and grew up in Miami and Atlanta, went to Georgia Tech, studied industrial engineering, and then worked in the consulting space for about 8 years. And then my wife and I lived in DC for about 5 years before Darden. At the time, we had our son. And then since coming to Darden, we had our daughter as well. So my son will turn 3 on graduation day, which is exciting. And then our daughter will turn 1 a couple of days before that. So we had our daughter in between the first and second year, which is exciting, and maybe we'll get into later. But I'll be headed back to DC after graduating. I'll be working for McKinsey and consulting in DC.
Well, congratulations. It's all very exciting. Got birthdays coming up, graduation coming up, a new job. I mean, golly, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Hailey, how about you? What's your story?
Yeah, so I am originally from Florida. I went to my undergraduate in Boston. I went to Wellesley College, which is an all-women's college. That was a wonderful experience. I also did ROTC for the Army at that time. When I graduated, I commissioned into the Army as a military intelligence officer. And I also met my husband while I was in college. He was also commissioning into the Army. So immediately after college, we moved to North Carolina to Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, where we spent about 5 years. And we deployed 3 times as a family. And my husband is still in the Army. When I transitioned out, had my son Ezra, who is now a year and a half. And then I came to Darden.
Well, Hailey, I'm curious about how you got interested in pursuing an MBA. How did you decide an MBA was the right next step for you?
Certainly. So my undergraduate degree was in political science and Middle Eastern studies, which set me up incredibly well to be a military intelligence officer. However, unless I really wanted to go into the political sphere or defense, it didn't set me up so well. So during my time in the Army, I really learned that I did love leading mission-driven organizations and leading people. So I had a mentor who actually is a Darden class of 2022, who was a former commander, and said, hey, I think an MBA is really be a great toolkit for you to learn all the business skills that you need to in order to really lead great organizations. So how I ended up at Darden.
It also always starts with seemingly with a conversation with someone, maybe someone who knows Darden, knows the
Yes.
MBA experience. Lisandro, how about you? How did you get interested in pursuing an MBA?
Yeah, so with my background in industrial engineering, I feel like I had a lot of knowledge about some topics, but there's a lot of things that I wanted to explore more. I tell people all the time my last econ class was in high school, and so getting the chance to really dive into topics at the intersection of business and society was important to me, and to be able to work in consulting in the international development space long term, or the public sector, especially as we go along. And so I felt that in order to do that, I really needed to strengthen my foundation a little bit more, especially when it came to finance and econ, which neither of which I needed to graduate in undergrad.
All right. So, Sandra, you mentioned you were in DC. You'd spent some time in Atlanta before you went to Georgia Tech, but you were in DC as you were looking around at MBA programs. What put Darden on your radar?
So proximity to DC was really big for me, and especially with um, at the time one kid and now two kids. Being able to connect back to our community in DC was important to me, and then also the case method was one of the things that really drew me to Darden. And then I was someone that going to lectures in undergrad was much harder, and the idea of doing that again in a master's program was difficult. But once I learned what the case method meant and the ways that the ways that it worked itself out within the classroom, became really appealing to me.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. The idea of sitting through lectures, particularly if you've been working for a while, not the most exciting proposition. Certainly, when you think about full day of class, a couple of years of school, case methods start sounding a lot more attractive, a lot more energizing. Hailey, how about for you? How did you get interested in Darden?
Sure. So like I said, my former commander was a Darden grad. He really, advocated for me to come here, but it was definitely also based on location. My husband still being in North Carolina with being still active in the Army. And I actually grew up coming to the Shenandoah because my great grandparents are from Winchester. So I knew I loved the mountains. I knew this was just a gorgeous region and the location worked really well. And I just love the mountains. But as far as the classroom environment went, I'd always been in really small classrooms. So I wanted that small classroom, which I mean, for 70 people, you would think it would be large, but it really feels so much smaller because you get to know everyone so well. And it is such great conversation and you learn so much from your peers as much as the professor. So yeah, I love how interactive the classroom environment is and how you're expected to show up prepared for each class.
Yeah, I hear a lot of folks talk about this human scale of Darden here on the podcast. People who have been in a small liberal arts environment, the idea of being in classes and talking with your classmates feels very similar to what they've been doing in their prior educational experience. And then sometimes for people who've gone to really large public universities, the idea of being known to be in a smaller environment, particularly for your graduate professional school education, it has an appeal. It's a good time to have personal attention and have people know who you are.
Yes, I certainly agree. And I think the class size is pretty perfect.
So Hailey, you come to Darden. You mentioned you'd gone to Wellesley. You served as an intelligence officer in the military, but MBA program, graduate programs, new to you. What was the adjustment like the first couple quarters?
A great question. It was definitely an adjustment, especially with the case method and having so much to read every single time. But admittedly, some of that reading being more important than others. Darden does a great job with the tech notes of laying out, hey, here's what you fundamentally actually need to know. And with the case method, more so giving you stories in order as learning technique to allow you to read that, do that. So I really learned to balance my time of I use an app and listen to a lot of the cases, and then I'll go back and read the parts that I need to, and I'll read the tech notes in detail. So there was a large adjustment of like, oh my goodness, I cannot read all of this. No one has time for that. To, okay, I found a way to prepare myself for class and to be there. And so that was a big adjustment, just figuring out how to manage the workload and how to make sure that you showed up to class prepared enough, but also not beating yourself up over, oh, I don't understand every concept, because by the end of class, you'll get it.
Yeah, I love that point. We have a lot of students on the podcast talk about figuring out how prepared to be for class, how much is enough, how much is not quite enough, how much is way too much, and probably not the most efficient use of your time. There's a calibration process that happens there. And I love your point about the case. The case is there to explore the application of a technical concept or something that the faculty member wants you to learn more about. It's there to create context for that particular concept. And really, when you go to class, it's all about application. See, like, how well do we understand this? What do we miss? What do other people, help? What can they help you understand, or what do they see in this
Yeah,
particular problem that you didn't anticipate?
yes, and I think it's a great life skill learning how to manage your time and what's important in what you're reading. What do I really need to hone in on? What can I brush over? Because you can't show up to every meeting 100% prepared. You need to know, what do I need to actually know, and what balls are glass, what can bounce.
Lisandro, you're at a different point in your Darden journey, but if you can cast your mind back to the beginning of things, those first couple quarters, what was the adjustment like for you?
Yeah, I think for us, the rhythms that we had in the work world lent itself a little bit better when it came to um, taking care of our son and being able to balance a lot of those family responsibilities. And then coming to Darden, a lot of the timing for everything shifted. So all of a sudden, I might have more time in the early afternoon, which was just much more unexpected as opposed to when I was working. But then in the early evening, I might having to go to learning team and making sure I was prepared for cases the next day. So it's really around kind of the reworking of the shifting around the hours of when I was free and when I was not free, and understanding how I need to prioritize those things. And similar to Hailey, about understanding what you really needed to learn within the case, and be prepared for class. Um, I think was really important. And then of course, you have to balance in the recruiting elements once those come in as well, and just being much more rigid and intentional with timing. I think was something that was a big adjustment when we got here.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of our guests, the being intentional with your time, recognizing that you can't do everything. So having some clear sense of priorities, North Star is what a number of people have referred to it as, that can help you make those tough calls. When you have several important things, what's most important at this particular time? Um, I will say that this episode is actually by popular demand. We don't always get a lot of emails, letters from our listeners, but we actually had a listener write in and said, I'd like to learn more about the Parents of Darden student organization. Can you have some of the leaders from that organization on the podcast? And so here you all are. So, Lisandro, can you tell us a little bit more about what Parents of Darden is all about?
Yeah, so Parents of Darden, which I am the former president of. Hailey can tell us a little bit more about what it'll look like next year as the new president. But it was started a couple of years ago as an official club recognized by the university in order to really create community amongst the parents that are students, as well as the parents that are partners within the Darden community. Just the idea that being a student who's a parent, life looks a little bit different, to say the least, compared to most other students. And then similarly, if you're a partner that's at Darden, or if you're a partner with children, that's just a little bit different as well. And so finding a place to create community and then to support each other along the way, just understanding the various needs that parents have within the classroom and outside the classroom, and then to then be able to represent them to the student body, to the administration, is really important to us. And then also by creating, or in order to create a community, we've got tons of events. We make sure that Darden specific events have an element of planning for families as well, to make sure that this is a place where families can be just as included in the student process. It'll look different for sure, but making sure people can have a home here in Charlottesville and in Darden is really our goal.
Thank you for that, and all things we'll come back to. Hailey, I want to pick your brain here a little bit. What is in doing an MBA program as a parent look like? I mean, what does your schedule look like, maybe relative to some of your other classmates who don't have kids?
Certainly. Well, and one important caveat is that I am basically a single parent during the week. So my husband, like I mentioned, is still active duty in the Army, and he during the week works in North Carolina, where we formerly lived. So during the week, I'm on my own. Every weekend, he comes up and really helps step in. But what it looks like is I'm usually up around 6 a.m. First thing I do, because you never know when your child's going to wake up, is first thing I do is pack lunches, get all the fully necessary things going. And then I pack lunches, I get myself ready, and then it's about 7 o'clock usually. And I'm starting to wake up my son, get him ready. I usually leave the house, which I live right next to campus in the townhouse neighborhood, Huntington. Highly recommend for any parents coming in. We can talk more about that. But I leave about 7:20, drop him off at 7:30, right when daycare opens, and then I depart and leave for class. I'll sometimes have about 10 minutes to eat breakfast in the dining hall before breakfast starts, or excuse me, before first class starts, as long as nothing runs behind schedule. And then I get out of class. I usually try to take the afternoon, get some work done. I have a very strict rule, though, that between about 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock is time with my son. Again, because I'm the only parent during the week, that's the only time he really gets with us. So it's 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock is playtime, dinner time, bath time, put him to bed. And then, especially at the beginning of the year when my learning team was meeting almost every day, my learning team would come over at about 6:30. We set up the basement of my house here, and my learning team is absolutely phenomenal and agreed to meet at my house all year. We'd meet from about 6:30 to 8:30 or 9, and then I'd go to bed and do it all over again.
So a full day, a very full day.
Yes. Yes. And yes, I did manage to get 8 hours of sleep most nights, but that's very important to me. Some people, I'm sure, studied more, but to me, having sleep was more important than being more prepared.
I think all the science is telling us that we should probably be sleeping more. So I think you're right by putting the emphasis there. Lisandro, I'm curious about what your schedule list look like. I think it's just helpful for people to hear, like, how are you making all this work? You've got a couple kids, you got family, you got school, all the other things you're trying to do. What does your typical day look like?
Yeah, so for me, my wife stays at home with our kids. So during our first year, my year resembled a little bit more of what Hailey was mentioning. But now as a second year, especially to give a different perspective, my first class is at 10. They tend to not schedule too many 8 a.m.s in the second year class for whatever reason. And so we wake up in the morning, my wife goes to the gym, and then when she comes back, it gives me enough time to get to my 10 a.m. And so in that morning period, I get our kids up and make sure they're fed and try to make sure to dress them for the day before leaving with my wife. And then I tend to have class from 10 to 1. And then I schedule any meetings I need or knock out any of my cases for the rest of the week from about 1 to 3. And then I go to the gym and work out. And then I try to get home by about 4:30. And then from there, just try to have family time. And so, within that, you've got a ton of meetings that pop up sometimes, or maybe we all come to cold call on a Thursday together. But for most of the time, I get to spend a lot more time with my family than I likely will in the future.
A cold call, for folks who are wondering, is a social event that happens every Thursday. It's sponsored by different student organizations. But I like that idea that you just mentioned, that here in the second year, you're setting your schedule. Maybe you have a bit more time. Your schedule's obviously going to be very, very busy after graduation. So this is a nice kind of respite. Yes, you still have school, but a nice kind of break before things ramp up again and you take on your new role.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part or fact, and something that we're going to want to talk to the incoming students about next year is expectation management of the first year with the 8 a.m. classes and having 5 courses almost every quarter, and then recruitment on top of that. It's really expectation management for you, your partner, and your family about this is a definite commitment to get me the job that I want and to succeed at school. It is it will end. Second year will come, and there will be a lot more freedom in our time and ability to focus on family. So it's definitely a conversation that we want to have with the incoming students to make sure that everyone is on the same page, that, it's a commitment, but it's worth it.
Hailey, I want to stick with that for a second. So
Yeah.
Obviously, when people come to an MBA program, they haven't done an MBA program before. They can talk to current students and kind of hear their perspectives. But how do you set those expectations? It sounds like things also continue to evolve as you go through that first year.
I think expectations come from either having a lack of knowledge or having the knowledge of what the facts actually are. So a lot of parents coming in don't realize, they look at their class schedule and say, hey, I have the afternoons off because we have class from 8 a.m. to about 1 p.m., like Lisandro said. most days as a first year. So you're like, oh, I have the afternoons off. Oh, honey, I can help with the kids in the afternoon. The expectation management is having that conversation of you're going to have work to prep for in the afternoon. And if you don't, then you have recruitment that you need to be doing with it, networking with people, learning about jobs, figuring out exactly what you want to do, or pivoting yourself to be able to get that job that you really want if you already know. So I think it's just that conversation of don't, especially in the fall, don't expect to have too much time. But if you have set priorities, like I really want to be there for bath time, make that happen. Block it off on your calendar.
It's interesting to hear you say that. I work a lot with our executive MBA and part-time MBA students, and executive MBA students in particular typically have families, and they're doing school and work and life and all these things simultaneously. And the thing for them is also somewhat similar. Block off those things that are non-negotiables for you. So if you always want to
Yes.
be able to do this particular thing with your family, put it on the calendar so your learning team knows, that other people in your life know that this is a priority. This is sacred time for me. I can't schedule anything during this block.
Yes. And I think being open and honest about that is huge. I know it can be difficult at times to say, hey, I want to be with my kid, because to some people that might not seem like the most productive source of time, but it is so enriching. And I really think that that time allows me to show up better when I am in class or in meetings. That helps out in the end.
Lisandro, I want to ask you this question about expectation management. You've been through a couple of years of the MBA program now. How do you go about setting reasonable expectations or helping your partner, spouse, other people in your life understand what you're embarking upon here?
Yeah, so one thing we developed about halfway through our first year is before a quarter would start, we would map out what a typical week looks like with my wife and I. And I would let her know what my class schedule was. I'd make sure she's aware of what my schedule is. And then we would find the pockets to fit in what we wanted to do. And so we make sure that she has a chance to get out and work out every day, make sure I have a chance to work out every day. We've booked Fridays to be me with the kids alone as much as possible to make sure she has the time to do whatever she needs to do and make sure that it's not just errands, that it's really just her time. And by taking the time each quarter to do that, it's really helped us when it comes to approaching the weeks. That being said, we then every Sunday or maybe Monday, if we don't get to it, we have to look at that specific week and what has come up and what meetings are needed, what conversations have to be had, what things have come up for her that we need to make sure to fit in, and make sure that we have coverage for everything.
Yeah, I love that advice. So much good advice y'all are sharing here. Again, that advice also resonates with what I hear from our executive MBA students. Oftentimes they'll sit down with their family members and they'll map out their schedule for that quarter. And they'll say, this is when I have a weekend residency. This is when I have online class. What else do we have going on in the family? Where are the potential, conflict points where I can't maybe necessarily be in two places at one time? We're going to figure out all of this. Where am I going to need support? And just being intentional about it, maybe being a bit more planned about it, can be really, really helpful when you have obviously a lot of people you have to think of. Well, I'm curious also about making this MBA decision with a family, with other people in your life. Hailey, how did you involve your husband? Obviously, you have to think about your child as well as you were thinking about your MBA destination.
Certainly. So it may seem a little crazy to those listening that I'm doing this essentially as a single mother during the week, but my husband was supposed to be deployed during this time. So that's where it came up of there's no good, just like having children, there's no good time when you want to have a professional career. So you have to jump into it at some time. So we thought, hey, this will be a great year. He'll be deployed anyways. We might as well go for it. That ended up changing because plans always change, but it still worked out very well for us this year. And I'm happy because I did take about a year off to have a child. And if you want to jump back into your career, you've just got to jump back into the deep end of the pool. So that's really what it was. There's no great explanation for it besides it had to happen at some point.
All right, Lisandro, how about you? Making this MBA decision, obviously with the family in tow. Any particular thoughts, considerations you would encourage prospective students to keep in mind?
Yeah, it really for us was around having agreement to the schools we even applied to. So if there was a school that, for whatever reason didn't feel great for either one of us, we wanted to make sure to not even apply. So then it wasn't something that then we would have to continue to have a disagreement with throughout the application process. And then in the end, considering all of the factors is really important because you're bringing your whole self includes your whole family when you're coming to an MBA program. And then also making the difficult decisions you have to as well. We've had some classmates that they have kids, but they've come here on their own, and their partner has stayed with their children, sometimes in another country as well. And so those tough decisions and sacrifices have to be made sometimes. And for us, thankfully, proximity to our families in Atlanta was also something that was big for us. We have family in North Carolina. And then understanding the city of Charlottesville or whatever cities you're applying to is really important too. So we had talked about New York at one point, for example, and the idea of New York with two small children. People get it done and people do it, but for us, it's just not what we wanted. And getting down here, coming to see Charlottesville, seeing how family friendly the city is and how many opportunities are here was something that really drew us specifically to the city as a family that someone else might not have as much of a perspective. A simple thing like getting to come to Darden, you easily know where you're going to park. You can walk your stroller right on the grounds. Seeing the ways that worked out for us, and then how much the community embraces families here as well, and how much the Darden community, includes children, loves them, wants them to be part of, wants parents to be part of everything, was really helpful for us as well.
Yes, and to add on to Lisandro's point, Darden and parents of Darden and Lisandro in the past has done an amazing job making this community. But I also think the location is very inherent to making that happen, and that a lot of people live here at Huntington or Ivy within close proximity. So tonight I'm going to a little fire pit. We're going to do s'mores with a bunch of kids. We do that all kind of thing all the time. There's so many families that live right here in the next townhomes over. So that, and then the fact that Darden is in walking distance and we can, yes, take the stroller down. My husband during J term showed up with my son in the middle of class, not in class, but for a break so that I could see him for a few minutes. It's both the people putting in the effort and also the fact that everyone comes here to Charlottesville. People don't know each other, so we make a community. And that has been really just wonderful and made my Darden experience.
Well, Hailey, Lisandro talked about what he has been doing or was doing as the president of parents at Darden. You are the new president of parents of Darden. What do you have planned for the upcoming year?
Certainly. So, of course, we'll have some parent-specific events, but one big thing for me is that there is so much already on the Darden calendar, is that I want to really continue what Lisandro's done, which is making events such as Cold Call family friendly. So having a kids corner, having a place where kids can go and you as the Darden student or the partner can then socialize with other people and build your community. So that's one thing, making as many events as possible family friendly so that parents feel like they can show up with their family and aren't having to choose between Darden or their family. Second is hopefully creating a little bit more institutional support at Darden. The number of parents at Darden has grown exponentially over the last few years. It's for a few reasons, but in part because, as myself am, there's a lot of military coming to Darden now, even more so than in the past, and a lot of military families or people coming have families. It's just a cultural, people have kids a bit younger. So it's really growing at Darden and becoming greater. So wanting to get a few more things institutionalized for support systems at Darden. So those are my two kind of main lines of effort, continue community and grow the institutional support.
I appreciate that. For folks who are curious about the military experience here at the Darden School of Business, encourage you to connect with the Darden Military Association.
Yes.
I assume, Hailey, you probably had some engagement with that club as you were doing your research.
Yes. Yeah. The DMA is wonderful. They reached out to me, and we as parents of Darden are working on doing that as well to as many parents as we can. Hopefully in the future, because of that overlap, we might be partnering together to get parents who are in the DMA to be reaching out to admitted students. That's another thing that we're working on, but the DMA is amazing. But there are probably more than half the DMA is not parents. So having this specific community that supports each other and lets each other know about things is just, it's been great.
Lisandro, one of the things that I've heard from some of our students who have families, have kids, is that when they get to graduation, it's a family achievement, not just the individual student achievement. Does it feel that way to you? I mean, you're on the threshold here. You're almost to the finish line.
Absolutely. And it being my son's birthday, the day that I graduate, just kind of adds to that much more. Um, One of the first days of school, I sat my son in my seat behind my name tag, and we are already talking about, making sure that on the last day we get a picture of him and our daughter sitting in that seat now, and just it captures the whole journey that we've been on, especially having a child here in Charlottesville during the program, and getting to interact with so many families. And you also get to see so many other kids grow. The first year class alone had about 8 children this year. And several of my classmates also had children or came in with really, really newborns at 3 or 4 weeks old. And so now they're running around grounds, and you get to just see everyone grow together. And it's really felt like a full family affair, and especially because so much has fallen on my wife. And, I say we're graduating because she's put in just so much work. And spouses and partners that come here really do put in a lot of work on behalf of their students. And so it's very much felt like a full family effort here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've had folks from the Darden Partners Association, the DPA, also may be of interest to some folks who are listening to this podcast, curious about parents of Darden. We've had them on the podcast as well. And one of the things that they have really underscored is how integrated partners also feel in the Darden community. How, yes, they have this club and organization, but there's so much space for them to join activities and come to things. Has that been your partner's experience, Lisandro?
Yeah, for sure. So my wife was deeply involved in both of our section talent show competitions on behalf of the Darden Cup. She's also a part of the Cold Call Chorus, and so she's gotten to continue to build community in those ways as well. And she's also met a lot of friends, even some that are students that I still don't really know well. She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go hang out with so and so." I'm like, "Who's that?" And they're like, "They're in your class. Like, you don't know them?" And I'm like, "I feel like I would. I don't know. I just happen to not interact with them." So it's been cool to see her develop a community and get to pursue her interests here as well. I mean, she's also getting to work in the local theater scene here too. So she's gotten to plug into the city of Charlottesville, which has been really cool too.
Yeah, and I've had a great experience with the partner community as well. I actually almost every Saturday now I go to a workout class with 2 other moms. Their husbands are at Darden, but it's them that as a mom, there's not as many of us, but I've really found great community with so many of the partner moms here that have supported me. Like on the snow day, there was 2 snow days this year, and I needed to be in class, but my daycare was closed. Other moms took care of my son to allow me to be in class, and that kind of community is just the best. Like it's you couldn't pay for that.
It's a very powerful story, Hailey. So I wonder, Hailey, what are you looking forward to in the coming months? Here you are at the close of your first year in Q4. Summer will be here before you know it. What are you looking forward to?
Certainly. So I will be interning in corporate finance down at Delta in Atlanta. So I'm very much so looking forward to that. Gonna get to do some traveling both before and hopefully during working for an airline. I am looking forward to my husband moving up here this summer and then getting back here in the fall. I actually today had some conversations about what I'm going to do for my independent study during Q1 next year. Like I said, very excited to be able to specialize what I'm studying while also continuing to take finance and economics courses. Because like Lisandro said in the beginning of this, like really wanting to hone in on those skills for when I reach corporate America.
Want to stick with you here for a second, Hailey. If you could tell us just a little bit more about what an independent study is, what does that look like?
Well, I've not done one yet, so maybe Lisandro can tell you. However, I'm working on the application. So an independent study looks like you come up with an idea for what you want to study, whether that be a research paper, whether you want to write a case, or I'm looking at forming maybe a J-term class or a class. And then you find a professor who, also works within that realm and who you partner well with, and then they become your advisor, and you get to work for either a quarter or a whole semester. So a quarter would be 1.5 credits A semester would be 3 credits, and you're expected to do the same amount of work as you would normally do. That is my understanding. Lisandro might be able to shed a little light on what his actual experience has been.
Yeah, I actually just got to complete one last quarter with one of our econ professors. So, being from Honduras originally, I wanted to get to study the country through more of an economic lens, especially within the context of global business. And so, what if a company wants to be doing business within Honduras? What are the things that they should factor and understand? And so, in order to pursue that, I approached my econ professor who I had during core, and I, wanted to dive deeper into some of the economic topics that we looked at with that lens in mind. And so, along with another Honduran student, we were able to complete a case study over the course of the quarter. And we're actually going to keep adding to it as we go, more of a living document and continue to deepen our understanding. And really gave us a chance just to explore something we're passionate about. And that's something that hopefully I can then build on in the future too. And to really get the chance to work alongside people that are experts in this field and to ask them, really insightful questions and then also really uninsightful questions and just being able to really strengthen your understanding in a really safe environment was really helpful. And to build such a great connection with the professor too was really a great experience.
And the independent study is a great example of how second years have a lot more flexibility in their schedule and how, as parents, that can really help because you don't have to necessarily be in a classroom at a specific time. You can get the work in whenever that's best for you, whether that be early morning, late night, or middle of the day. So there's a lot of opportunities like the independent study to get course credit without physical classes.
Yeah, I appreciate that point. There's J term, which is a short 10-day term between the fall and spring semester that's popular with students to take an elective. We're also developing some asynchronous or self-paced electives that are out there. I know of a couple that are offered currently to our part-time MBA students, building experimentation skills, as well as strategy in the digital age, maybe even a couple more to come. I've heard of an operations class that's in the works. So yeah, more and more different class types that are being offered. Lisandro, I want to come to you with the same question I asked Hailey. So, graduation, obviously a big thing you're looking forward to. Starting a new job, yes. But what else are you looking forward to in the coming months?
I think it's really, with the starting a new job, it's being able to really put into practice things that we've learned here at Darden. Really get to see the rubber meets the road, right? Just really seeing what it's like now after taking this time to do this experience and to get back into the working world and also just getting back to elements of regular life. Being here at Darden has been awesome. It's been a great time. And we're also just looking forward to this next phase. My son's going to preschool, which is both sad, but also just a marker of that next phase of life and getting to go back to work and build my rhythms and also see my wife perform again. She's put so much on hold. She's a musical theater performer, and so getting to go back to DC, getting to see her back on stage again, and being able to give her so much of the support she's given me over the last 2 years to see her continue to recover too is going to be really exciting.
That is great. Well, thank you both for coming on the podcast. I have one last question for you. We tend to wrap up with just a piece of advice for our prospective listeners. Obviously, you've given a lot of advice here, but I wonder, Hailey, what's something you would encourage our listeners to consider as they go forth on their own MBA journeys?
Certainly. This is a very technical piece or tactical piece of advice, but if you decide that you're coming to Darden or you're even 70% sure, get on daycare wait lists if you're going to use a daycare, because I know right now they're almost all booked up. So that sounds a little tactical, but it is. If you have a family, you've really got to plan ahead. So whether that even be when you're in the application process, you say, hey, this is my top school, go ahead and get on wait lists because it will help you out and be a stress reducer when you get here.
Very tactical, but important for people, particularly if you're going to be using daycare while you go through your MBA program. Lisandro, how about you? A piece of advice for our prospective student listeners.
I'd say if you can, if possible, take the time to visit the schools that you're applying to. Really giving you the chance to get a feel for the place and if possible, also bring your family. And that'll really help you see what will it be like. When you're having conversations with students that are there, please ask the real questions. You don't have to sugarcoat things. You can really ask what's difficult, what's great, and just really try to get as much full picture as you can when you're part of schools.
Yeah, I love that advice about visiting. There's so many different ways to visit. We have large group open houses, typically during the fall, a chance for people to come and kind of have maybe a half day of activity. You can come for a class visit, which is also a pretty full day. We're recording this episode on the occasion of Darden Days, which is a big admitted student weekend that takes place late in the spring. We have another admitted student weekend a little bit earlier in the year. So many ways to spend time in Charlottesville. But to your point, this is a big decision, and to both of your points, it's a big decision, not just for you, but for your family. You want to make sure everybody is comfortable with the location. They feel like it's going to be a good place to spend a couple of years. Because I think Hailey said it earlier. Everybody who's coming to Darden is really picking up and relocating for this experience. So you want to make sure it feels good. It feels like the right place for them.
Yeah, and I want to add on one more point. Certainly feel free to reach out to anyone here who has been here. Everyone would love to talk about their experience, whether it be the actual Darden student or the partner. There's some great resources, so please feel free to reach out.
All right, Hailey, last question. If someone wants to learn a little bit more about parents of Darden, where might they go?
So there is a webpage that we are updating right now with my information. I believe it's still Lisandro's, but if you just search Parents of Darden in Google, it should come up with our contact information.
All right, start with the Darden website. And as noted, please feel free to reach out to any students. All right, well, Lisandro, Hailey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was great chatting with you, and congratulations on all the exciting things that are happening for you.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks for having us on.
And that was my conversation with Lisandro Sagastume and Hailey Webster, two leaders of the Parents of Darden student organization here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. You can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.